Splendid. Hopefully everyone can see that. As
Looks
with all, excellent, good. As with all Linux Foundation event meetings, I'm going to start with the antitrust policy notice. I ask you to familiarize yourself with this. If any one has any questions about this, can they either raise that with their own legal departments, or alternatively, if they are a member of the Linux Foundation, then they can contact Andy Updegrove at Gizmo Updegrove. Excellent. Right, let's kick off. A lot's been going on. It's great to have Shane joining us as well, who's been instrumental in an awful lot of this activity. So thank you to Shane. Just sort of going through some of these bit by bit. And I suspect Shane may have more to add to this as well. So Shane, feel free to leap in when appropriate. So you'll recall previous sessions we've reviewed and looked at the training slides, and so Shane's put them on GitHub in Markdown format. The last couple of months we've identified a few minor issues arising out of what is a really good set of training slides, I think. So there were things like a few broken links, so I fixed those, submitted pull requests for those, they've been accepted. So that is a link to the slides as they are at the moment. But obviously, this is a rolling release process, and as we go on, these slides are going to be subject to a process of continuous improvement. Shane has noted that there are a sort of couple more issues that we need to address. So I think there was a wall of text problem, Shane. I don't know if you want to briefly tell us about that.
Absolutely, absolutely. So one of the major improvements in the drafts of these slides, or I should say not draft, it's done now, in the new version of these slides is basically saying this bit talked about this and just providing contextual information. The issue is that on trying to put it into our old PowerPoint format which is how we originally distribute the education slides. The contextual information just doesn't fit. So I think we need to consider whether the training slides stay in PowerPoint format from us, or do we explore an alternative format? For instance, one page instead of one slide and have a training leaflet or similar. And I'm just raising this to spitball because the expanded text is definitely useful, but it also definitely doesn't fit in formatting. I had that problem when I was looking at it, and also I had an issue flagged to me when someone else was looking at it in LF as well. So we just can't get it to fit in the PowerPoint, certainly not in easily readable text. We'll lose the snappiness. And that raises the question of what do we do? If we throw it into something like our supplier leaflet, which is coming up later, if we throw it into that type of format, that's print ready, but that's only useful for a certain demographic in the market. Now, the training slides have famously gone everywhere and been used by everyone in every context. So we probably shouldn't do a print ready format of it, something like Adobe InDesign. But if we consider what else is there apart from PowerPoint, uh, we we have options. Things like Word documents, I think, are read by everyone everywhere, and they can copy paste and take this CC0 material wherever they want. We have the option of splitting the text across more and more slides, but we're at 80 or so. So if we're going to double that easily if we keep going into the PowerPoint format. And that's a topic for you, really. And also, some people here have dealt with working in a few different companies with a lot of experience in building programs like Jeff, working with a ton of clients like Andrew. So the question is, what on earth do we do when we don't have a simple slide deck anymore? We've got too much text, but we want to make it so that people can remix, reuse, integrate. What do we do next?
Yeah, there's some interesting constraints here. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna, Andrew, if you have a comment, I'll let you go first. But
yeah, I mean, I was just going to sort of briefly say when we've used them, and we use them a lot. Sort of one of the things to bear in mind is that the way that we present them depends on the audience, and particularly whether the audience is likely to be using English, have English as their first language or not. Because I think if they have English as their first language, then you really want to sort of take a more punchy approach and have the slides which sort of highlight the key points, and then most of the information becomes as a narrative behind the slides. Whereas I feel that it's easier for people if you're presenting in English, but English is not their first language. It's easier if there's more information on the slides. So to an extent, you're sort of reading out the slide text and then maybe providing a little bit of a sort of additional contextual information as well. So I mean, I'm just sort of putting that as a piece of context in terms of how we think about this. We should be able to address, those different audiences.
Yeah. And I agree. I think every class, whether it's math, physics, open source, licensing, open chain, there's a textbook and then there's the lecture notes or the lecture presentation. So I think it's very important for open chain to have both of those. And I think it's really common that people, what do you start with? Do you start with the PowerPoint because that's that's a strong need. Like if say we turn this into a textbook, probably the next order for the education team would be make me PowerPoints for the textbook that we just created. So I think we always need to have whether PowerPoints or whatever it is, but like screen ready slide presentation so that an educator, an OSPO lead, whoever it is, open chain lead can say, I got 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour, whatever that is, and take our, whatever our number is now, 80 something, I don't know where we're at, 84 slides, here's my 15-minute version. I go delete every third slide or whatever it is, or here's my half an hour, here's my hour, or when I've done this in the past with my equivalent of these slides, it's part one, part two for most folks. And then as I get my pyramid of, the 4 engineers at the company or 1 engineer, I'll have my part 3 and 4 for like the core IP team. And I would take something like these 84 slides and do 20, 20, 20, 20 for what's appropriate. So I think we need them. I do think they're kind of text heavy, and maybe some of this should be split between on-screen and speaker notes. And this also maybe becomes the basis of a textbook, but my experience is nobody reads textbooks, or the practitioner, the one open chain practitioner at each company is happy to have the textbook. But when they go to talk to executives, when they talk to the core engineering team and security team, we live and die by PowerPoint. And it's, what can you teach me in half an hour is, I think, part of the goal. What can you teach me in my next half an hour is part of the goal, and so on and so on. And I think this deck is a good start. But I'll leave it there for now and then let it give some more space for other folks.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. Any other comments on that?
Just a response to the comments so far. I mean, I can try and cram the stuff in into and points well taken. I mean, here in Japan, and bear in mind, I'm a permanent resident, 15 years here. Japan is my home. So with all the love in the world, Japan is a place where you come across the most brutal presentations possible of text-dense slides, and people read off them in a monotone, and you wait to die. But the purpose, of course, is so that anyone, anywhere can come back to the slides and have full context. And it works really well in that context. So we can do this. I can go back to the slides. I can personally go through it and try and format them out. And that will make some of them very heavy. But hypothetically, Dan, if we do somehow squeeze everything onto the slides, then there can be a mix, which we might make, or someone else could do it, where they chuck a bunch of text into the speaker notes, or as Jeff said, they do my 8-slide version. And if we do the full fat one, then if we have time, we could do a whole chunk of stuff goes into speaker notes version, and the rest of it other people can remix. So we can do that. I just want to flag it will look pretty rough when you first open it.
Okay, here's an idea which might not work at all, but I'll mention it anyway. How about we have slide X and then slide XA. And basically slide XA is the sort of the lengthy version, the slide that we have at the moment, the wall of text version of the slide. But if we sort of go backwards and then turn that slide into the punchier version, so we just have a sort of very small number of bullet points which are derived from what is effectively the text, then the wall of text bit is essentially what Jeff is talking about as the textbook is concerned. And if you want to use that as a slide, that's fine. But actually, if your audience, prefers the more concise version, then you can use the more concise version and then sort of read out the speaker notes, which would essentially be the longer version. So you have sort of slide 1, slide 1A, slide 2, slide 2A. But actually, the slide 2 is going to be a simpler version of slide 2A. And it's just going to have those literal bullet points on there. So I say that's just an idea. I don't know if go back to have a look at the slides and see if that would work in practice.
I guess the main thought I have is because we tend to do rolling updates to the core material, if we have too many variants of the slides, updating the PowerPoint version will become challenging. But then again, if we went with the process of saying the point release, okay, point release X is now going into the PowerPoint. So point release X of Markdown is going into the PowerPoint, and we do the full fat version. Then that can be our basis. And if we have the energy to make lighter versions of the slides and so on, that's great. And we can just double check it came from this version of the Markdown. So I guess that's totally fine. Absolutely doable. Can do. First step sounds like action item for me. Somehow cram in the full fat version of the slides and get that done this month. And then we can the text is done. You've done all the work. It's brilliant. So we can release the full version and then do the punchier version on this revision without stopping editing of future Markdown. So yeah, no, absolutely. Action item my end. It'll be fine. I don't need sleep. It's good.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Thanks, Shay. Anyone else got any comments on that? No.
I guess I'll add one more thing on this, which is, I've been talking to some folks this week where people are saying, "Oh, how can this be so hard? It's just looking up the license." That type of comment around open source compliance and whatnot. And everybody on this call has spent 5 years, a decade, 20 years, sometimes 25 years dealing with open source licensing and compliance and linking and security. And I think these slides reflect, the 10 to 20 years that that become a strong practitioner. And so I think if we look at these slides as, there's 80 to 100 slides that says this distills 20 years of knowledge. I don't think I don't think we should be too shocked about that.
Yes. No,
we also should be looking maybe with the eye toward, that what are those versions of these slides, the 15 half an hour, is there a version of this for onboarding? A lot of us have joined new companies, and maybe open source gets 0 minutes, maybe it gets 5 minutes. What's the view of this for the 5 minute? We're not going to get into linking, we're not going to get into XYZ, but we have 3 core slides around, just enough open source. So that's kind of like my thinking. Look, I'm at an OSPO. What can we do to help OSPO members get started, regular engineers get started, and people who don't even know they're using open source but are using open source, just enough to get going. And
no, that's a good point. And I say we're doing a sort of major training exercise for a client at the moment, and we've sort of very much come across that, and we've used these slides as a basis. And then in some cases, of course, we get the deep subject matter experts, and they just provide more information, which then means more slides, which is not going to be necessary, as you say, for all of the program participants. So it's also involved creating simpler slides, which are an overview of some of these points, and then basically figuring out, if you're in marketing, you need to know a little bit about open source if you're flogging products that contain open source, but you don't need to know what linking is. This is partially, there's an overlap between that need and the work that we're proposing as far as the explainers is concerned. It's not identical, but there is certainly an overlap between the two. I can certainly see the benefit in what you're suggesting there, Jeff.
Okay, and of course there is, Jeff's point that distilling this information is big, is valid, and I mean it's incredible how many people have contributed to this. Second point, I suppose, is that it's not our job to have the most beautiful end product. It's to have the most useful material, and we
Yeah.
can let other people polish it. Okay, I'll do this. In that case, be ready for small fonts, and
Hmm.
here we go.
Yeah, fantastic. Excellent. Thank you very much, Shane. Right, moving on to the next topic, which is the supplier education leaflet. So, Shane, you've done some sort of fantastic work on this, and you've circulated a sort of very, very pretty version of it. So, yeah, if we can move on to discussion of this, if you want, Shane, if you can sort of update us on where we are on this at the moment.
Had some very provisional feedback about the version 2. And, I don't know if anyone on the call wants to make a comment, but I had some very provisional feedback that someone seeing it for the first time found the reading logic good. And that I think is heartening. So, feedback from someone who hasn't been involved in building it, and they said it makes sense and it's interesting. So, well done all.
That's excellent. So I don't know if everyone had a chance to see the PDF version. So I will. I've got it up on the screen at the moment. I can just quickly flick through
Please
that.
do, because this PDF version is using what's increasingly becoming a generic template for us. So originally, the supplier education leaflet was built in InDesign. And as we went through the process of this one, the InDesign template was made as generic as possible and also used for the BlackBerry case study. And over
Mm,
time, will hopefully be used for more and more of our material. Uh, InDesign is not easy to edit with. It makes it harder for contributors or people like myself to jump in and do anything. But it does mean that when it's printed, it's perfect. It does mean that the PDFs are perfect. So the only errors are our own, and it can go anywhere in the world as a coherent, finished, non-editable document. You can see, for instance, there's a small error on point 3 of table of contents, just a spacing error. And that's the type of thing I would love people to pick up and tell me about. That spacing error is actually corrected. I found it in the PDF export and corrected it, but I wanted to show it to you on the call because it's an error I know.
yeah.
And I'd like you to, if possible, have a look at the pretty version and pick up some of these errors because this is what goes in an email attachment to suppliers around the world.
So what's the tool chain like for getting this sort of from Markdown into InDesign? Does it require a lot of work to do that, or is there a sort of template process that will automatically take
Right.
the Markdown and feed this into this template?
So the initial answer is it was hell on earth.
Yeah.
But there is a template, and that template is available on our GitHub. And the template is being updated iteratively. So I'm going to just post a link to show you where the template is. There's two things I'm going to post a link for. One is the actual supplier education source material, and the other is the template, which is being used and will be updated to make things easier and easier to use. Okay, one moment, and I will provide these links. So our version, our supplier education version, which actually has the most advanced version of the template used at its core, is on GitHub here. And the generic template, which will be updated with tweaks from what we've just had on supplier education, is here. It's currently under the case studies area, but it'll probably be moved into a different folder over time. So short answer, it's getting to the stage where with Markdown, you just copy paste and do a few formatting items on paragraphs and bullets.
Yeah.
Uh,
Okay.
that wasn't the case previously, but we're getting to the point where Markdown to printable is getting fast.
Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. I mean, I think we can all agree it's looking really good. It's the graphic design is great. It's very clean. easy to read. Yeah, so feedback, any comments, please?
So looking at the PDF, I do wonder if we there's a lot of text and we don't have any open chain logos in the inner parts of the documents. Like if you just click on page 14 or something like that, or any of these, and I wonder if a tasteful open chain logo in the orange bar or something like that might help A, give us some branding, and B, break up the pages a little bit. I'm not sure how it when it's all folded, whatever, if it's too much or not, but it might be
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. And one
to
thing,
get the branding in the project.
yeah, no, that's an easy enough thing to integrate into um, the template, I think. And one thing that's noticeable is that on the left pages, so for instance, page 16, where the text is left aligned, the top of the page in the orange is empty. And on the right side,
Yeah.
which if we go down one page, there we go, it has the title of the document. So it seems to make sense
Makes
that if
sense.
on the
Yeah.
left side we put our logo left aligned, it would improve the balance and it would give us more branding.
Yeah. Makes sense to me.
And that's a very, as far as I know, easy thing to do. So it should be perfectly doable.
Right. Excellent. Good stuff. No, that's brilliant. So as I say, any comments on that? Yeah, feed them back. But no, I think it's looking excellent. Right. Okay. Let's get on to the next topic. Um, Yes. So, Martin, your videos. Sort of Shane is on the point of uploading those. I think Shane. Sorry, back to you again. Can you update us on where we are with
Yes,
those, please?
I owe Martin a huge apology. I'm about 2 months late on this. I am so sorry. I've just been struggling to get my backlog done. Yes, you've got the videos on GitHub. We're ready to go. It's a matter of uploading and pushing them out. And some things in the background were being done. For instance, OpenChain has now moved to, for instance, smarter social media posting. Okay, and this was a big thing with something like these videos, or for instance, our webinar series, so that it continually can promote individual items over weeks and months. And since about 2 weeks ago, that's been working and it's had a positive response. Our posts and so on are generating good engagement. In fact, our engagement is much closer to OpenSSF than it is to do group or chaos, which I think indicates two things. First of all, we've got a lot of material. Second of all, our topic is pretty hot for a lot of people. And this goes beyond traditional open source boundaries. Anyway, long story short, things like our distribution channels have got a lot better for publishing masses of videos like this. And I'm ready to do it this week. And then the plan will be that our social media posting and so on will keep on going into October on this topic, taking us to the 1 year point. And this will run with, all the videos posts, individual video posts, and then in October, hey, it's been a year. Don't forget this. So yeah, that's looking good. And just sincerely, I'm so sorry it took so long.
No problem. Thanks very much.
Right. Okay. Super. So yeah, we're romping through rapidly, which is great. You will recall if you've been on these calls before that we've introduced the idea of working on a few explainers. These are just a short set of slides, 3 or 4 slides per explainer, which are available to enable people to explain to certain business units within an organization what OpenChain is all about. So we've worked on producing now a couple of these. We've done a C-suite explainer, which I'm not going to run through that one again, but we've looked at that in previous sessions. We've also now done a sort of developer explainer as well. So this is, as I say, there's a sort of certain amount of overlap between this and what Jeff was talking about earlier, and sort of providing sort of simplified training materials. These aren't training materials as such, but they're basically for anyone in an organization, could be within an OSPO, for example, who wants to talk to people from particular departments within the organization and say, yeah, this OpenChain thing is really worthwhile, and this is why. So the idea is that it's focused on the needs and requirements and the benefits to that particular organization. So we can give you an example of the dev team leader explainer. So thanks very much to Stephen, who's on the call, for his work on this. So say we got sort of four slides here. So first slide is, what's the issue? Well, the dev team, they need to use open source, and they want to use open source. But there's uncertainty around which code they're able to use, and that's frustrating for them. It creates friction if they have to sort of seek clearance every time they have to go to the legal department or whatever. The issue is they need to be aware, and they are aware, that open source software is subject to licenses, and those licenses need to be complied with, and it's a risk to the company if there's a non-compliance. And as we know, products can contain many thousands of open source components, and each of those components has a license, and those licenses need to be complied with, and that creates an awful lot of work. And what do developers want to do? They want to develop, not deal with compliance issues. So OpenChain is the solution to this. I'm not going to tell you what this slide says, because you all know it very well already. And this slide is sort of broadly the same. I envisage between the different explainers, it's pretty much the same as the one that we did for the C-suite explainer as well. And then there are some benefits that are targeted specifically at a dev team leader. So first of all, so if you implement OpenChain, you reduce friction in selecting code and obtaining clearance to use it. So that's helpful. You get better documentation and traceability of the code components. So if there's a problem, you can find out, where that problem arose, and that will give you good pointers on how you can potentially remediate it. And specifically at the moment, we're talking about open source compliance, but this also aligns with the need to track vulnerabilities, and that's obviously something else that OpenChain can assist with as well. So it reduces compliance risk, and it also means that you have to talk to the legal department less frequently. Hooray! Developers are happy, legal department's happy. That's great. It increases the trust in third-party developers' deliverables. A bit of editing on the fly there. It simplifies the process for creating and tracking compliance materials, compliance artifacts as well. It contains a simplified process for escalating issues. So, if you're not sure whether you can use a particular component or not, then your OpenChain compliant program will have some process for dealing with that. And that means that you get increased productivity from developers and the other program participants, because you've got better ease of selecting components, so on and so forth. And that leads to faster development time and better, more traceable code. And we all love that. And then we've got some more sort of general sort of benefits, which again, this is sort of fairly generic. Something like this is going to be similar across all of the explainers. And it basically says, how wonderful OpenChain is, who it's backed by, who uses it. You're not an outlier by using this process, etc. So what I envisage, I think we've had consensus on previous calls that people think this is a good idea, and this is very helpful. So we're going to turn these into Markdown and make them available on GitHub. But I think it would be good to have a sort of portfolio of these, maybe 6, 7, 8 of them addressing sort of different parts of the organization. We've had some sort of great suggestions earlier. So, for example, somebody mentioned that the HR and training department could use some background information about OpenChain, and so that will help them to formulate the training programs, etc. Then you've got sales and marketing, for example. You've got product packaging. So different departments will need it sold to them in a different way. I guess what I'm sort of looking for here is really, comments on whether people still believe it's a good idea. It would be grateful. I'd be grateful if people would consider, getting involved in terms of either producing new explainers and putting them on GitHub, or alternatively providing comments about, the ones that we've provided so far. So we've got the C-suite one and the dev team one as well. And really, whether you think it would be better to, go through these using these calls as an opportunity to have a deeper dive and actually sort of tweak the wording live, as it were, or whether it's better to do that offline. So anyway, that's enough me talking. So sort of the floor is now open if anyone's got any sort of thoughts, comments about these.
Yeah, Andrew, I'm still very supportive of it. I sent round a markdown version for sales and marketing, which was just a bit of a go. It's not particularly my area either, but I thought it was interesting. Yeah, I think it's probably good if we perhaps get like the first versions of all of them done first, and then perhaps
Yep.
kind of, as you say, try to standardize across like the last page and stuff like that. But I'm not sure we'll know what exactly that last page should be as a standard until we've done most of them. So I think it's probably good to get at least a draft version of the ones we think we need or want first, and take it from there.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. I'm a great fan of sort of iterating these things. So if we just get something down there, and then we can iterate those. Yeah, no, fantastic. Thanks, Martin. Any other thoughts?
I like where this is going. I think it's really good to have these explainers. I've come across more and more people outside of our little ecosystem saying, I don't get it, especially in jurisdictions like Taiwan. So in that case, I think it's very valuable. One side thought, if someone is out of a different zone, like for instance, someone isn't a development team leader and doesn't deal with those problems, but comes across one of these explainers, they might think, what? Because they
Yeah.
have a different mental model. So perhaps in the explainer family, when we publish them, we might want to somehow tell people, look at your genre if you're getting confused, because a product leader might have a very different view to
This
a
is true.
lawyer. Yeah,
Yeah.
just a thought.
An explainer of explainers with a link somewhere saying this is an explainer for product developers. Click here to see, what other explainers are available, which might be more pertinent to your interests.
You maybe that's the first page, with say with the link, or maybe the last page saying
Yeah.
other targeted explainers available here. But I think it's a good point, Shane. Yeah, I think we should probably think about that and see if we can address it.
I can chip in on that one too. I think as the number of products from this group develops, you might want to take that point about some sort of meta information a bit further. Sort of on what's being produced and what's it useful for, and when to use it and when not to use it. That would be quite handy, because some of the courses and the curriculum, information very different from an explainer, and very different from something we're going to talk about later too, the capability maturity models.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, any more thoughts on this?
So how many does that mean are we missing at the moment?
Anthony's got
The
his hand
first
up.
list.
I try to remember how many. I think it was something like 7 in total. But I'll circulate the list in the mailing list, so we got a full list. And then, so Shane, if you can find us a little home for this on GitHub, and then we can provide markdown versions and put them up there.
I guess I was wondering whether we can get a volunteer to do the first draft of some of the remaining ones. Otherwise, will we get them?
Well, what I'd like, before we get the volunteer victim chosen, which is a great idea, I love it. I just wanted to flag that what we can do, and what I think we should do, is to put everything in the reference library. But I think it might be time for me to rejig the reference library. And there's a lot of material there, so I don't want to walk through it on calls because we'll need a lot of time on that. But what I suggest is, if in the next week or so, people could share any ideas they have of how the read through of the repo could be better to hold all this material. That would be good. But anyway, under reference library, if we think about it, right now it has some very clear root things going like case studies, blah, blah, blah. Maybe we just add explainers right there. So you can see case studies, explainers, and that will take you right through once you land in our library.
And I do know, when you look at the OpenChain webpage, I forget what the exact words are, but it's, it says something along, and we have hundreds of documents to help you. I read that sometimes as, oh, that's great, but I also sometimes read that as a threat, like prepared to be overwhelmed. And I
Yeah.
do go to like the reference library, we have a mixture of old stuff and new stuff and in development. And I think it's sometimes kind of a little overwhelming, especially if somebody wants to click that download zip. They're like, okay, I'm going to get started. I'm going to download the zip of the reference material and I'm going to get started. And it's, megabytes and megabytes and megabytes of stuff, especially some historical documents. And I wonder if there's maybe if we can split old versus, and I know it's important to keep, here's one, old and new, and we're a spec and we're moving. But I do wonder if there's like the one and done. If I click a download zip button and I get all the docs that are pertinent to me, that are current, that are not historical and archaeological and all that, it's kind of like this single download button. And then maybe there's like a skills explainer or a skills tree, start, stage 0, start here, stage 1 here.
Yeah.
And you kind of use that as a document map because I think people get overwhelmed. They don't know it, do they go alphabetical? Do we have a 0, 1 colon? That type of, I don't think we need to do that right away, but I think that's part of how does a new company get onboarded? What does that doc dump look like? What do they even know what zip files what zip to download and where to start? So
I suppose one thing we could do, and this is going to make any programmers feel allergic, but I could shift around the repo to put the historical documents into something like a historical document folder with a README saying, this is stuff that might be useful, but we haven't touched it for a while, and therefore dragons are here. And then for the main items, the core things are kept front and center. You go into the repo, and then there's case studies, explainers, supplier leaflet, and so on. So we could do that. It would still mean that the download of the zip is big, but it would mean that all the historical documents would be thrown into a historical document folder with a warning that this is old stuff that we're not deleting, obviously, but it hasn't been touched. Would that be a potential solution?
Maybe. I mean, I think there's a couple things here. One is just the size of the zip. People want to download it or have it on their phone or something, and it's kind of becoming unwieldy. Number 2 is, we don't want to break links. If there's things that are still important that are doing deep linking to, specs and training docs, we don't want to break that. Some projects say, top of tree is top of tree. Historical, if you want to go historical, go look at previous releases, etc. I don't know if I have an answer to it right now, but there may be something like, the getting started link is a targeted zip file of, the latest release stuff. No historical things, no InDesign docs, no, nothing that's everything that's work product versus the scaffolding that makes that work product. I guess I'm not saying do anything surgical right now, but it's just something whenever I've downloaded this stuff, I just get overwhelmed by it, and I'm somebody who's helping out. I can't imagine if somebody's who's trying to do this, so they just 200 whatever it is, 175 megabytes. Oh, that's too much.
Oh, yeah, I'm downloading it right now. I'm at 470 megabytes and counting.
Right.
So,
and is that after it's been zipped?
Yeah, the zip is coming down from GitHub right now.
Okay, because it does compress pretty impressively, this sort of stuff. Right. Okay. We now have an idea of the scale. Yeah. So Jeff, that makes a lot of sense.
Okay, yeah, that's a good shout.
It is an interesting point. I mean, if we break historical links, that's an issue. But if we leave the current structure, it's very hard for people. Now we're at 720 megabytes on the zip
Maybe
file.
there is a new repo which is consumer.
Library.
Consumer. It's the library. It's we have our current repo, which is the think of it like as our source tree. And then what
Yep.
are the binaries that come out of the source tree? Well, we're going to put them in a different repo. It's the final PowerPoints, the final PDFs, etc. And the goal of that repo is consumer downloads, one and done, no interim products, no
Yep.
equivalent of no source code, binaries only.
I mean, we've communicated that there's a library and we've pointed people at the reference material repo, but there is entirely the ability to create a new repo with that stuff. There's the core stuff, the freshest stuff, the production stuff. Um, what do others think? By the way, 1.14 gigabytes so far on the zip file.
Right.
Andrew, do you think having a new repo where we cherry pick the key documents and put them there would be something you're amenable to, as
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I mean, the key to this is to sort of make it as like everything else, open source, as frictionless as possible. So I like the idea of having a sort of a start here, read me on that repo as well, which just makes it very easy for people to find what they're looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah, do we think this is more of an issue of how people interface with the content? And right now it's just through a GitHub repo rather than potentially a wiki or leveraging markdown file that really kind of give you an interface to the content in a more readable format. And then as content changes, you can just say, hey, we're going to link to the new version. The old one will still sit here. And if you want to download all the content in one mass, you can, but it's maybe not the preferred way to interface.
So we kind of have split the difference on this historically with having some material on the OpenChain website as the friendly landing space, and then kick people over to the repo for the other things. So the link for that on our website is resources, and that hasn't been rejigged by the community for a while. But the idea was there's a landing web page and then there's the GitHub repo. But the GitHub repo, just by sheer daunt of age and contributions, yeah, 1.38 gigabytes zipped and 1.66 unzipped. So it's big.
Which is larger than my Linux ISO that I download. I mean, I like a one and done for downloads because if anything that's friction or an impedance mismatch of if I have to go click 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 and I don't I'm brand new to OpenChain and I don't know that if I have to go click 14 links or 23 links to see the pages or download PDFs, I think that prevents people from engaging. And I think if we do a nice zip download that's like the latest and greatest docs with a skill tree or a read me first that says stage 0, stage 1, stage 2. It's kind of like we're training the trainer. Download this zip, open the read me first, read it, and if you're an expert, great, go do cherry picking. If you're not an expert, follow our skill tree, and you have the teacher's manual in front of you. Read one chapter, go teach somebody. Read the next chapter, go teach somebody. And I think that's how we get people. It's got to be kind of self-documenting, and people don't even know what to click on because they're not OpenChain experts. I think we got to make it big download button and a start here, and experts can cherry pick. I think newbies need handholding, and that only can come through documentation because we can't do individual handholding.
So running with this, it sounds like, and this isn't guidance for the project. This is me just as GM Dog's Body. I'll have to do some work on the repos. What I'm understanding is we have a new library repo, and education team will decide what goes there from the reference library. Reference library is where we continue to build things. For instance, it'll be the home of the editable versions of the explainers. Reference material GitHub repo, the current one. The reference material GitHub repo remains the home and the editing space. We have a new repo, library, and we cherry pick documents to put in that. And perhaps we update the OpenChain resources webpage, choosing what to put front and center. For example, new explainers will probably go front and center on the web page, but then it quickly goes to a download link where you download the zip of the library and boom, you've got a whole bunch of key documents, but not too many, and so on and so forth. Does that sound right to you? So reference material remains root. We have a new library one, and I'll need your assistance in building that and deciding what goes there. And then we rejig the web page as well to make sure we're pointing at the best, most interesting material to guide people and improve our onboarding from dear Lord to, oh, that's nice.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Super. Right, good. Okay, that sounds like an excellent way forward. Right, let's move on to the next thing that I wanted to talk about. So we haven't got a huge amount of time, but one of the other topics that we've discussed in the past is the implementation of the capability maturity model. And this really is a sort of very live issue because we're working on a couple of client projects at the moment. And both of them have the issue that they did declare OpenChain conformance some years ago, but basically because they internally sort of saw it as a sort of one-off and done process, that means that they're now rediscovering that they have to they basically have to sort of re-implement all of those procedures because it wasn't sort of embedded deeply enough in their organizations. So one of the tools that we can employ in order to help people to understand that OpenChain is more than just a one-off and done activity is to introduce them to the capability maturity model, which is something they've been working on with Stephen. So I think, Stephen, if I can, I don't know if you've got enough time to sort of run us through an overview of what that is, and then we can talk about very, very briefly the materials that we propose to use this work group to cover.
Thanks. Yeah. Sorry, Colin, you finished?
Yeah, I finished.
Yeah. No, so thanks. I think with the time that's available, I think it'd be really interesting to get a steer from people as to what kind of education product could be useful around a capability maturity model. We have an idea, but I think it's just worth having a good discussion about that today. And some of this material I have shown before quite a few times in different places, but so I will sort of run quickly through it just to bring everybody there up to the same page, and I believe that's is that the right one? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll just keep it at that format. Is that legible? Hopefully. So very, very briefly, have a quick recap as to what is a capability maturity model, why are people using them, and what work have we been doing using that with live work for people and organizations to get to this question of, okay, well, what do people around this table think would be a useful thing to do with the education working group? And one of the things that we are thinking would be useful to do as a reference piece of work would be something which gives you a sort of like a baseline view of these are the capabilities that are actually useful to have in place so that you have a sustainable ability to comply with OpenChain and actually move towards high quality arrangement. So just very quickly go through the basics. It's a capability maturity model is just a framework that allows you to take a snapshot across the organization to answer the question of how good are we at doing something. And that's what the longer language there talks about that. So how adaptable or resilient is a business function? How sustainable is it? And quite often people ask this question, well, how good are we? Because we'd like to improve and we'd even like to inculcate a culture of continuous improvement. So bringing that down just a little bit more from the 50,000 feet level down to a little more tangible points. We've found that this idea of sort of asking this question of, okay, well, how do we move beyond this question of initial compliance? Okay, yes, we complied once, but how good are we we may be acquiring a different product or a different capability, or we may be launching a new product, or as Andrew said, in some scenarios, people have left, or an organization may be asking a question, well, actually, we want to be really good at this because it's core to our overall strategy and our brand. So we want to ask ourselves that question today of how good are we and how might we improve. So there are organizations out there who are wanting to move beyond that initial question of straight compliance. And then we've seen things like this come in a number of different ways. So people sometimes wanting to build a decent business case back up to senior leadership as to say, yes, well, we've done compliance in the past, but we need some investment here. We need better tool chain. We need more support for our OSPO, and something like this could give you a mechanism for building that business case. I won't go through all of these one by one. We don't have time. But this is the wider context for a capability maturity model. And the question is, okay, well, what's a useful product for an education working group to do around this piece? So far, we've done quite a bit of work with using capability maturity model. We've come up with some definitions and road tested some definitions of, well, what different sliding scales could you apply for how mature or how good are you at something? And we've done quite a lot of work with defining those capabilities that are needed to achieve a sustainable, good quality open source management practice that conforms with ISO 5230. So, and we've also mapped those capabilities to the original specification. And there is some work we've done in terms of assessing clients, and that approach has been shared in quite a few calls like this in the past. The core components of the model, I just quickly flash through. We have these different maturity levels, and these are borrowed from industry standard practice around capability maturity levels. If something is defined and implemented, for example, level 3 maturity, you'll see that policies, practice, procedures are all in place. But if you actually have experience of that and you're proactively managing, you'll find level 4 maturity is where you'll be able to see, okay, well, here are some actual measures that we're expecting to see. So, for example, error rates in source code analysis. For example, in terms of the tool chain that you use, an interesting measure of a KPI of how quality process is being managed. You'll expect to see some of those in place. And then when we're talking about, well, what do we mean by a capability? Well, something has either been implemented as a specific role or a governance structure that needs to be in place, or there are processes, or there's information that's being handled, or there's systems and tools and capabilities around to help support that capability. And the model itself just takes the ISO requirements and maps them in a number of layers and builds upon the specification by sort of calling out effectively processes and capabilities that sit under each of the requirements of the specification. And then with that in place, I'm going quite fast here, but I think it's sort of just trying to prove the point. And then with that in place, so as an example, if you want to look at an organizational capability to manage bill of materials, here are some assessment questions which drill down to that level of detail that say, okay, well, does everybody, do the key role holders, for example, the development team leader, do they have an understanding and a definition in their role accountability for the development of bill of materials is one kind of question you can ask. And then, for example, does the tool chain have functionality that supports the generation of SBOMs and the like? And these are the questions that you can get into in a lot of detail. So the proposal for the education working group is not to sort of get caught up at this level of detail, working through all of the different capabilities, but to see, well, is there sort of like a high level baseline definition of capability measures which would which would be useful guidance and educational training material to say to someone, look, this is an edge point between, okay, level 3 maturity and level 4 maturity, so this is what, okay, established practice looks like, but this is what really, managing effectively something. Equally levels 1, 2, or 5, 5 is optimizing. And that we could sort of produce some training material that would then give people sort of tangible examples of best practice that's out there that we see to help either in that initial establishing of compliance, or people who are coming back to the drawing board and going, well, hang on a minute, we've really let it drop in this team or this capability. How do we get them up to level 3? Or this area over here, we really want to drive that area towards really optimizing their open source management capability. What practical, tangible things do you think we could put on a shopping list for investment to get in place, or from an education point of view to help educate and train a development team leader or whoever? This is the stuff you should be thinking about putting in place next. So there is that question that we wanted to discuss today. Shane did share the link on the email to the document, which is a starter for 10, which we're proposing we could use as a document to populate. But before I dive off into that, I think I'll stop. Oh gosh, we've run out of time. I'll stop to see if anyone's got any comments on that approach and the sort of the concept of coming up with a baseline set of capabilities that would really help people pinpoint between those significant levels of maturity of level 3, level 4, level 5.
Just to point out that Jeff said he loves maturity models and finds them useful and help with skill tree and education onboarding. He's dropped, but he likes it. And Ruhi also said very interesting stuff. I put the link to the document on maturity modeling, the 10,000 meter view, into the chat as well, so people can see what's what.
Excellent. I mean, I don't propose we go into any detail on that at the moment, sort of given the time constraints. But certainly, if people have any other comments that they want to sort of throw in right now, I'd be very happy to take those, and then we can sort of move on to this on the next session, maybe.
Yeah, again, I'm very supportive of it. I guess I had a quick look at it, and it looked an excellent start to me. I guess I was struggling a bit in the sense that I can't actually read very much of it, even on a big screen at a time, let alone have it all in my head to try and review it in a consistent fashion, if that makes sense. So I don't have any answer for that, but maybe if they can have some thoughts as to whether we try to review it in chunks or do a high level and then down. I honestly don't know, but what I've seen so far is fantastic.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thanks, Martin. Well, we'll continue to work on that in the background. You have the link now that's open for editing and commenting if anyone wants to sort of do anything to that. That's great. I'm going to take this opportunity to wind up because we are a little bit over time. Fantastic participation today. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed, everyone, for coming along, especially those for whom it's the wee small hours of the morning. So looking at you, Shane, as one example, but I know you're not the only one. Now the next meeting is scheduled for 7th of August, which I'm able to make, but I do realise that it will be sort of holiday season for a number of people.
I think it would be fantastic if we could press ahead regardless, because, for instance, Japan will break on the 10th of August for about 8 days, but there will be time to bring in our Japanese contingent. And I'd love, if we're digging deeper into maturity modeling, to, push that to try to bring people in and get feedback on a deep dive as soon as possible. So I'd love if we could proceed on the regular schedule in August.
Right. I mean, is there an argument for saying that the next session should be earlier in the day to make it easier for those in the East to join?
Yeah, but the maturity modeling will require a lot of reading. So
Yes,
this
yeah,
document, and Stephen, if you could send me the slides, if we could socialize this document and the slides, then maybe we can capture the feedback from Asia ahead of the call
yeah.
mostly.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, if we get a lot of good feedback, I mean, very happy to run a separate session focused on Asia. We can do that in different time zone if necessary.
Absolutely. I mean, as you know, Andrew, Stephen, I'm excited about exploring this. Oh, Kathleen just said people with little experience and new to this would love the maturity model, sort of giving shortcuts to success. And I think that's generally the feedback I'm getting. So the sooner that we can provide more information on this, the better. There's been two areas of detraction on this, which I've heard. One is people saying, won't maturity models make things more complex? And that's a valid question. And the answer is, it may seem that way, but maturity modeling helps set the tone for continuous improvement. And the other one is people afraid that there could be the perception that level one just isn't good enough for your open chain conformance. And the answer is no, it's fine. You're using the ISO standard. That's totally fine. This is really about Kaizen, continual improvement,
Exactly.
and upping your
Yeah.
game.
Yeah.
So I think, the only two things I've heard with concerns raised are natural, useful, genuine questions that we can easily answer and help people with. So in that case, the more we do, the sooner we do it, the better. If I get those slides and push that document, I'll go crazy in Asia and social media in pushing this ahead of the next call. And then perhaps the next call can have a deep dive in this and I'll shut up more.
Sounds perfect. Excellent. Right. Okay. Well, thank you very much again, everyone. Thank you very much for your participation. If you happen to be living somewhere where you can vote tomorrow, please vote.
Not relevant to
Well,
me, Andrew.
no.
Different country, don't care.
Yeah.
Just make sure you vote the correct way.
Well,
wherever that is.
obviously, yes.
Oh, thanks, Andrew.
All right.
Thank you
Thanks
very
all.
much.
Okay.
Thank you
Bye,
all.
everyone.
Oh, and Anthony, well done on your contribution and note here on what you're doing. Welcome.
Yeah, I'm very much a case where all this material is perfect for me and the kind of the open source committee that I'm working on. So
Yeah,
Fantastic.
great to meet you, Anthony.
Yeah.
yes, pleasure to meet you all.
Welcome. Okay.
See you next time. Bye bye.
Bye all.